Okie dokes. So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. We're here with Offbeat Talks with Cheryll Watson, who is the co-chair and advisor of the advisory board with Startup Genome. So, welcome, Cheryll, to our show, and happy to have you on board.
Thanks for having me. Happy Monday.
Yes, no, it's Tuesday.
Oh, it is Monday. Wow. Great. We're off to a great start here.
Well, it's a free-for-all, nothing to worry about here as we get going. So essentially, we're just going to run through a few questions, get to know you a little bit personally, and then also get to know your journey as you've moved through Intuit, Innovate Edmonton, and now with Startup Genome, and just getting to know you as we have a conversation today. So, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Okay, so please tell us about your personal story and how you got involved with Innovate Edmonton, and most recently as your co-chair with the advisory board with Startup Genome.
Sure. Thank you. So I am a born and raised Edmontonian. I grew up in Beverly, early beginnings there. I went off to Emmy Lazert High School later on in life. And really built my family and career in this city. I do love this city. I'll share a little bit about how I really began to evolve my career. Back in 2000, I was working for IBM at the time, and I was working in their facilities management division. And so I was the facilities manager for IBM at the time. And I was approached by this company called Intuit, makers of TurboTax and QuickBooks. And they had a grand idea that they were going to build a new building over on the south side of the city, and they needed to do it in 6 months. This was absolutely unheard of. I know that a number of people that they had spoken to in the industry at times even scoffed at this idea and the feasibility of it. But for me, it really sounded like an incredible project. And I was just so impressed by Intuit's belief that this could happen. It had never been done before, construction at that speed. And so I took the job with Intuit. The very first project, like I said, was the construction of a 100,000 square foot building. And of course, the site that Intuit selected, it was a farmer's field. It's a farmer's field over on Roper Road. There was no services, no road. And we walked around this farmer's field, and they said, in 6 months, we're going to be moving our engineers into the building, because at that time, when you were releasing software, there was hard code freeze periods where then there could be no disruption to the engineering team at all. And so they had a hard deadline. So it was one of the most incredible projects that I worked on in my life. It was really exciting, and I absolutely fell in love with Intuit. And I spent 15 great years of my career with them. I'll talk a little bit later about some of the work that I did with Intuit, but later on, Intuit became a global organization. And while I also had a global role and had been working all around the world, I'd always lived in Edmonton. And it was really never a problem, because I was a remote leader, I was a global leader, and my area of jurisdiction was really, it was 6 different countries. But at that time, Intuit called my ticket and said, it is time for you to move to the Valley. We need you here every week. At that time, I was commuting a week in San Francisco and a week in Edmonton. And they just said, it always seems that when you're in Edmonton, we need you here. So they asked me to move to Silicon Valley. And at that time, my family, my husband and I have 4 kids, and we weren't able to disrupt the family and move them. And so I made the choice to stay in Edmonton. And at that point, I really took some time to say, what is it that I wanted to do? I'd had such an incredible experience with Intuit that I really wanted to be thoughtful about the next place that I would spend my time. And having always loved Edmonton and always been a champion of Edmonton, as I traveled around the world, I really wanted to have a role that I could see my work helping to move Edmonton forward, to help evolve Edmonton as and really lean into our full potential as a city. And so EEDC was always an organization that was on my radar. I thought they did some pretty incredible work, and I became relentless in my exploration of an opportunity with the corporation. And luckily enough for me, a role came up, and the role was to be the vice president of a division called Urban Economy, which really reflected the city's economy. And so that's how I ended up at EEDC.
Okay. You did mention that you're a global leader, and obviously one of the things is, and working remotely, I think one of the challenges is trying to be a leader when you don't have the people around you as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your leadership style and what that was all like? How would you consider yourself as a leader?
Yes. I think the most important role that a leader has is setting a clear vision and then defining what the desired outcomes or the expected outcomes are from that vision, and then really allowing your team to perform and do the job that they're all well skilled to do. And so I was taught at Intuit, and Intuit is an incredible developer of leaders. It's one of the areas that they spend a lot of time in, was around how you are an enabler. Your job as a leader is to develop your staff, to fit them with the best opportunities and best match for their skills, and then get out of the way. Your job is to remove barriers, to enable the team. I'm also a big believer in accountability. And there was something that we talked about a lot at Intuit was a say-do ratio. And your say-do ratio should always be balanced, we believed. And so if you say you're going to do something, you need to deliver and you need to do it. And so we talked a lot about a one-to-one say-do ratio. I would also say I'm a connector. I love to share ideas. I love to help people achieve their ambitions. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to people, finding out what they're working on, determining if there's ways that I can help or if I know someone that can be helpful. So I would say those are some areas of leadership that I try and focus on.
And it's interesting you mentioned the say-do ratio 1-to-1. I think that's a nice way to look at it, because let's face it, a lot of people, especially leaders, do a lot of talk, but they don't necessarily walk the talk. And so I think that's one of the things to take back, to say it's like, okay, it's not just about talking about things, but actually putting it talk to action and essentially doing what you're saying that you're going to be doing. So I'm kind of going to use that term a bit myself to look at it. I used to use walk the talk, but say do ratio seems to be a little bit more inclusive in a lot of ways. What would you say are your three biggest accomplishments through your moves through IBM, Intuit, EEDC, and now moving into part of being Startup Genome's co-chair?
Well, I talked a little bit, I think one of my earliest accomplishments, and it was definitely a team accomplishment, was we were successful in constructing the Intuit building, thanks to a lot of incredible players in the city, Clark Builders, Manask Isaac, and many others. That was one of my earliest moments of pride. I remember standing on the balcony of the building and looking out and really couldn't even rationalize the from to of the work that we all did. So that is definitely one of my most proudest and most fun projects. I think the work that we did later on as the global business division of Intuit, we were a very small, scrappy team who was given the mandate really to determine how Intuit could move from a North American company to a global company. And our mandate was to figure out which product, which offering would have global relevance, and then to create a playbook for how you would do market entry. And it was about 5 years of incredibly hard work, a lot of countries visited, a lot of attempts and failures. We spent a lot of time, well, a year actually, working directly with Eric Ries, who is the lean startup author, very well recognized entrepreneur, and he really helped us to figure out how we were a lean startup within a massive Fortune 500 corporation. And so we accomplished, really, we moved from into it being in 2 countries to being having paying customers in more than 100 companies or 100 countries in our 5 years. And so I have a great sense of pride for all of the work that the team did on that. I would say lastly, in my role at Innovate Edmonton, I would say that I look back and think about the work that the team did, identifying the potential of the technology and the innovation economy for our city. I made a reference to when I joined EEDC, the division that I led was called Urban Economy. And we did a little of everything. We did activations downtown, and we tried to create vibrancy in our downtown. We did business retention and expansion work. We had an incredible platform called Make Something Edmonton, but we did a lot of things, and we really weren't moving the needle in one particular area or another. And so we narrowed down, and that was the creation of Innovate Edmonton originally, was to say, we need to focus. What is our biggest opportunity here? And I believed it was the technology and innovation economy. And so we narrowed down and we divested a lot of the work that we did either to other organizations or teams within EDC or to the city of Edmonton, or we sunsetted a lot of things. And so I would say finally then my most proud moment for my work at EEDC was the identification of the innovation economy and the potential of it.
Okay, very nice. I think you may have touched on this, but I'm going to still ask the question. What has been your biggest letdown in your career so far?
I would say it's probably the moment in time that happened back in April. And that was when EEDC made the decision that I would no longer be leading the transition of Innovate Edmonton out of the corporation. I don't like to sit on the sidelines at the best of times, but these are such a critical time for our entrepreneurs right now. And so it was tough for me to take a step back and not be able to continue to move the work forward. We were gaining a lot of momentum. Our partnership with Calgary and the Alberta Innovation Corridor was really getting attention from the provincial government and others, and there was a lot of support there. And so I would say this is the moment in time, sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Having done the similar type of work with the city of Edmonton, having to step away and seeing how things are transitioning right now, it's like I know I can help. I know we can do something. So, and that's what I intend to do with this company of mine, to actually start building out and helping move the things mostly on the social front here. So, okay. So, tell us about a tough day you had at work and how you pushed through it.
I'm sure that this day will come to mind and not surprise many people when I talk about it. It was back in 2018, and we had the idea of creating a new innovation hub in downtown Edmonton. We saw really the opportunity for us to expand some of our programs, number one. Number two, to create a new center that could provide entrepreneurs with the opportunity to really demonstrate what we're doing here. When we talk about technology and innovation companies, people want to go and see and talk to them and have a chance to see what they're building and creating. And so we wanted to create this center that could be a demonstration center for some of our strengths in technology. We wanted to create an investor center there where investors could come from around the world and really have a place to land and a place to have meetings. And so we had proposed creating a pilot, if you will, or a test of whether or not there would be interest in a type of center like this. And it became a very public issue. There were two groups of entrepreneurs that we were talking to. One group that was really at early stage in their needs, and they didn't feel that any money should have been put into real estate, I guess you could say. And there were other entrepreneurs that were further along in their journey that saw the value of this type of investment. But the topic came to City Council, and EEDC is an organization that is governed with input and influence from City Council, and City Council really struggled with the discourse on this topic. And so there was a public vote, that included entrepreneurs coming and speaking about why they felt this was not the right move, and the project was shut down. It was a very tough point because a lot of us saw a lot of value in this, but there was an incredible silver lining that came out of this day. Was really the realization that we needed to do more listening. We needed to do more engagement with the community. We needed to really validate what was the number one most important thing that people were wrestling with, and make sure that we were working on that. And so that day, while a really tough day for me personally, really brought our community together in new ways. We started talking with them more. We started convening as a community. We led the creation of engagement that resulted in a report called the YEG Compass Report that identified what entrepreneurs said that was most important for them, what was going to help move them along on the journey. So while a really tough day, it really opened the door to some great work.
Yeah, so this is interesting because I'd really like to get into a little bit on this one, especially with the new innovation entity that the city is bringing forward. I think they're calling it Edmonton Innovate.
I'm not sure, Alex, that there's yet been a formal declaration of the name. I think they've used a placeholder, if you will.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we don't.
Yeah, so we'll just call it the innovation entity that was proposed
Right.
by Mayor Don Iveson and so on. With everything that you talked about, the hub center and everything, what do you think is something that we need here at the city as we try and explore innovation and so on? Because this is near and dear to me as well, and I know it's near and dear to you as well through your conversations through the technology industry, Tech Edmonton, and all those things. What do you think is your say in terms of what do you think you would want this or entity to do for the city?
Well, first, I'm really pleased that the city has made this decision to create this new focused organization, because focus is key. I think that any entrepreneur would agree to this, is that you need to be really clear on what your outcome is you're trying to achieve, or the one problem you're trying to solve. And so now we have an organization that will have a very clear mandate. One of the things that was challenging about EEDC is you had this large conglomerate that did everything from conferences and conventions to tourism, to technology and innovation. And so there was always this rub within EEDC with Innovate because there were such differences in the needs between all of their customers that they were serving. So I'm really excited about this new organization. Focus will be key. The fact that it will be governed by entrepreneurs or by innovation leaders is going to be very important. That's really great. I was excited to see the new board chair announced. What we need, I would say, I would go back to the YEG Compass report. We heard directly from entrepreneurs about the things that were most important to them. They talked about an accelerator program that could as well include some sort of stipend or funding for the companies that were involved in it. We've heard loud and clear about procurement being an issue. And so there's a lot of, and I'm sure that, Alex, I see you nodding. Definitely, we have so many needs and problems that require solving at the City of Edmonton, and the procurement limitations don't allow our local entrepreneurs to deliver the solutions for these problems. And so I think that we had a very clear list of priorities that were outlined in the YEG Compass report, that this new entity and this new organization could hopefully go and it would be like low-hanging fruit for them, because entrepreneurs have already spoken and said these are the needs.
Okay, no, that's great, because yeah, we do have a lot of problems, especially with procurement. I'm not going to talk much in detail about it, but I know it's been one of the concerns in terms of being a very huge bottleneck when it comes to bringing that local talent in to do the work that's there. So we're about 21 minutes into this conversation. I'm going to take us through some quick fire rounds. So you're on the hot seat. It's going to be about like 4 questions. Don't think too much. Just what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Put that in. Okay, so are you ready?
I am ready.
If you could choose your nickname, what would it be?
Well, I don't know if you ever get to choose your nickname, and so I do have a nickname that people call me, and so my husband and others call me Watsy.
Okay. And any relation to Sherlock Holmes?
I don't think so.
Okay. If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
That's a great question. I've always been interested in being an interviewer. So I think about Barbara Walters, what an incredible experience she's had. Think about all of the world leaders that she's talked to. I think that would be an incredible experience.
Okay, that's good. What is your secret talent that no one knows about yet?
Well, I don't know if no one knows about it, but I have sang backup for a few bands. I actually sang on a couple of records or albums, CDs, you could say. And we have, my husband leads a family band. And so I've also sang backup in that band.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. Any popular songs that you've done?
Well, many popular songs that we've covered. My son is actually a pretty incredible artist too, and so he has a number of originals that he's created. The Late Night Train was his band name, and so if you want to go check him out, I hope one day to be able to sing backup for him and one of his songs.
That's good. Late night train, right?
Late Night Train.
Okay. How old were you when you had your worst haircut, and what style was it?
I probably was about 5 or 6. Remember when home haircuts were a thing outside of COVID? So my mom did cut my hair, and I would say that hairstyling was not one of my mom's best skills. And so early age, many bad haircuts. Later on, that progressed. I was a big admirer of Blondie and punk rock, and so I did get my head shaved on one side, I think when I was 15. So A lot of bad hair moments.
No, my son will attest to that piece. He's 7 right now, and we've gone through 2. We've tried the steel bowl on the head, and then tried to cut around it, and then just most recently we decided to shave it so that he looks like me as well. We definitely look alike based on that. But he's like, Dad, you're never gonna shave my hair again. You're never gonna touch my hair again. I'm just gonna get the barber's chair. Okay, last question on the quickfire round for round 1. If you could switch jobs with someone, who would it be?
I think I'm going to stay with my first answer, the Barbara Walters answer, and maybe I might say I'd like to switch jobs with Oprah Winfrey. She seems to
Oh, yeah.
be doing just fine, has an incredible community that she built, so I think that would be a pretty great day in the life of.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Good choice. Okay, so let's get back to some of the questions, and tell us a little bit about Startup Genome and what your role is with the advisory board. And I think that's something that everybody would like to learn more about, is where you're headed towards, and what this company does. It's based out of the Silicon Valley, right?
That's right. So the CEO's name is JF Gauthier. And we as a city have had a relationship with Startup Genome since 2017. And what Startup Genome began doing originally was benchmarking innovation ecosystems. And so they came up with a methodology that considered around 40 data points that they would use to measure the maturity of an innovation ecosystem. And so they would be things like average amount of investment given to tech startups, global connectedness of founders, how many relationships they have outside of the country, measured global customer base, and on and on. So there's around 40 measures, like I say. Silicon Valley always being the #1 innovation ecosystem, their position has not changed. And so as they were doing this work for many years, benchmarking and providing advice to local innovation leaders about where they should focus, they realized really that this ranking was not really changing much. Silicon Valley was always at the very top, and the same kind of cities were typically clustered. So then they determined then how they could increase their value. And so, like I said, they really leaned into advising innovation leaders. And so that's why we were working with them as Innovate Edmonton, is that we wanted to understand where our strengths were and where our gaps were, so that if we were creating new programming or had an opportunity to invest in a particular area, that we were learning from others that had been there before us, more mature ecosystems. Since then as well, though, Startup Genome continues to evolve, and now they are considered the world leaders in policy advising. And so they're now advising governments on what innovation policies are most effective. And so the advisory board is made up of leaders in countries all around the world. So there's leaders from Israel, from the US, Australia, UK, Singapore, on and on. There are 3 leaders in Canada that represent the country. I am one of them. And so what we do is we share our experience and our policy knowledge from our own countries with each other. This is in an effort to learn from each other. We know that things are moving fast. They're moving very, very quickly. And so we connect together monthly, quarterly. We help to validate some of the recommendations that Startup Genome is making to governments. We share our own experience and our own success stories. And so I was asked to join the advisory board. And then most recently, JF asked me if I would be co-chair of the advisory board, and my job is to help increase the value of the advisory board members, both to Startup Genome and to ourselves. And so how do we make sure that the advisory board members themselves feel like they're getting good value from giving their time to this, and that we are being the most effective advisory board for Startup Genome? So that's my job.
Okay, that's pretty good. Do you know about any, like, I know this is starting off with more of getting those information out and getting the analytics component out here. Do you know organizations like that, like Startup Genome, and what differentiates them from other organizations similar to them?
There are a number of other organizations around the world that do work like this. I'll just name one that is very well known. Kaufman is another very well known organization. Like I said, Startup Genome's value proposition is the policy advisory work that they're doing.
Okay.
And the number. So in last year alone, they advised more than 40 governments on innovation policies to be implemented.
Okay. That's yeah. Okay. I do want to get to this term that you used when you were with Intuit, which is around deliberate disruption. And myself working in that disruption field, I know that especially this COVID pandemic and everything that's happening right now has pushed people to think differently, act differently, and adopt new policies and changes that are happening, not just in Canada, not just in Edmonton, not just in Alberta, but globally. So you've termed it as, you use the words deliberate disruption as a key ingredient to success. What does this mean to you? And could you tell us a story about how you pushed that terminology in and working with the deliberate disruption?
Thanks for asking. I think that in the simplest terms, what this means is not being complacent. And so both as individuals, we have to constantly be evolving, sharpening our skills, learning new things, experiencing new things so that we can evolve. And so the same is true for companies. And so Intuit, right from its earliest days, when they realized that small business owners were using Quicken to manage their books and their banking, they realized that your customers can help disrupt or can disrupt your business. They really learned that competitors can disrupt your business. And so the most important thing that you need to always be watching is, what are your customers doing? What are, how are they using your offering? How are they behaving? What are your competitors doing? And so Intuit not only was very attuned to observing these things, but then they would action them. So think about this. Quicken was Intuit's #1 offering, created because the founder, Scott Cook, watched his wife struggling to balance her checkbook every month. And Intuit no longer has that offering. Quicken has been, it was a divestiture because they realized that First Mint, which was an online offering, disrupted their business, and then the banks themselves. No one else is buying a separate software package to manage their banking. The banks deliver it. So they were always looking at what was ahead. If there were indicators of the business changing, then they would activate against that. And so my own experience then, or applied experience, if you will, would have been with my prior work called urban economy. To say that this is not working anymore. We're not seeing the value, we're not seeing the outcomes. And so rather than have someone put you out of business, you need to figure out how you put yourself out of business, if you will, or that really be able to justify and validate the work that you're doing.
Okay, that's a good segue into our next conversation, because this is really about where we are at today. The COVID pandemic, we've got the financial crisis, we've got the Black Lives Movement, and how organizations and the political realm of things are taking different changes and policies in place to cope with where we're headed. So, being a transformational leader, you've definitely got some ideas on what thoughts could be put into place and everything. And so I just wanted to kind of start talking a little bit about sharing your views around that. And we can start individually, especially around the COVID pandemic. I personally know, like sitting here, I know that there are a number of businesses that are shutting down. They're potentially not going to come back. There's a lot of people struggling with unemployment, not having enough jobs in place. There's a lot of chaos that's happening, but there's also been a lot of opportunities that have come up through this. So could you share your views on where do you see us in Alberta going, Canada going, globally, how things would be from your perspective, and what your thoughts might be?
Well, I don't think that I'm going to surprise anyone with the identification that technology and innovation are more important today than they ever have been before. And we're seeing this right now in many of the health offerings that are being created and the health solutions that are being created. And then I believe that even the provincial government is recognizing this opportunity. Jason Kenney just announced the new investments into technology and innovation. And so while there are a number of companies that are going to go out of business during this time period, there will be a whole host of companies that are created during this time, and a whole host of problems that are surfaced that have never been more important to solve than they are today. And there are a number of companies that are now Fortune 500 companies or very well-known companies that were created in the last recession that we had, in the last financial crisis that we had. And so there is this recognition that we need to do more with less. And so I think that there will be much more of an openness to support technology and innovation now. So I am optimistic about the future.
What do you think would be the pressing ones that we would have to deal with here in Alberta, for that matter?
Well, health, obviously this pandemic and flattening the curve and allowing us to go back to, and maybe I don't know if we want to go back to all of the ways that we used to do things before, but I think pandemic control is the first area that everyone would say is the most important. I'm not necessarily going to identify a bunch of different opportunities, although I will talk about one. This is an interesting situation that we're experiencing. So my mom is living in a seniors environment, and she struggles with technology. And so we have been really virtually cut off from her as a family. It would be so wonderful to say, let's do a Zoom dinner with my mom, with all of the kids. But so I'm wondering about the opportunities really even to think about our growing seniors population and how technology could be used to better their lives. So there's an area that I'm particularly passionate about and looking forward to seeing more discoveries in that space.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I was going to bring it up a little bit soon because people have a tendency to think innovation means just tech. And my principle is innovation is about thinking differently and being creative. Your tech might be a solution, but it's not your go-to right away. And so I think the thing about what you said was, okay, we have a problem in terms of trying to diversify connectivity with the senior population. How do we do it? Tech might be a solution to it, but what else could we do to do that? So I've always found that people move. Yeah, I've always found people going like, okay, innovation means technology, and I go like, well, yes, eventually, but it also could mean change of processes. It could be like, just that continuous improvement on things that could lead to something major.
That's right.
So the other one right now is really around racism and discrimination, and kind of falling into bringing equity around for everyone. The Black Lives Matter movement in place, and so just your thoughts around how that relates to us here in Alberta, and how what we should be potentially looking at, because that forms in that social crux of things, and how we could try and build out that social innovation around this component. And I know I'm only asking for opinions. I'm not, because I know it's a big discussion and I don't want to put anybody on the spot on this one, but I think it's near and dear to a lot of people going through it, just to understanding the diversity that we have in Canada and around the world.
Well, you mentioned what does this mean for Alberta, and I think that we all need to recognize that this is a global societal issue for sure, and it's going to take every single one of us to really make positive change in this area. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post on this topic, I think about a month ago, so I did have some more detailed views or perspectives on it if people want to go check out my LinkedIn page. But what I will say is that the Black Lives Movement has really brought this critically important issue to the forefront right now. It's a shame that it had to take this type of situation to make that happen, because this is an issue that every single one of us need to solve. We need to be constantly assessing our own biases, because as much as we would deny that we don't have biases, all of us do. We need to be looking for opportunities for us to inspire better behavior, to influence better behavior, and for us to just not tolerate this in situations, and so to have a very strong voice to say this is not acceptable, and I'm not going to allow this to happen. And so I don't think that I'm going to say anything new or anything that hasn't been said before. This is an issue that all of us need to take accountability to change.
Okay, thank you for your comments on that, Tristan. I'm going to get back to round 2 of quickfire.
Okay.
And then we've got some last questions as we wind up our conversation. Probably should start with this one because, yeah. What's your favorite tip to give passengers while flying?
Favorite tip to give: sleep when you can sleep. So I had a global role. I spent more times than I care to remember changing time zones and living on a plane. And so there were always different perceptions about how the best way to adjust. And that's my number one mantra: sleep when you can sleep. Pack light. Being in the global business division, there was nothing worse than losing your luggage on a trip. So while my husband never sees this when we go on vacation, I can pack for nearly any length of business trip with a carry-on.
Oh. That's, I'm not going to make a comment on that one. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Resiliency. I am relentless in things that I am passionate about. And I've taken a lot of falls. I've had a lot of hard scrapes at times. I think I've described different points of my career, my life, like it's being drugged behind a car on a gravel road. But hard work is hard, and important work is hard. And I think that resiliency is something that we all need to constantly be working to become more resilient, because look at even what this pandemic has shown us is that the world is changing, and there are hard moments in life, and so resiliency is something that we should all be really focused on practicing.
Definitely something that we need to all look at. So it's a nice superpower to have. What advice did you get that was the most rewarding and that you still hold to your heart to date?
Gosh, I've gotten so much incredible advice over the years. I think that what comes to mind is be true to you. Intuit was an environment that had the most inspiring leaders that you got to work with at times. And I remember being at a few tables where I felt like I had imposter syndrome. What was I doing here? I did not go to Yale like this person did on my right, or work for Boston Consulting Group like this person did on my left. And the best advice I got from a senior leader was, you deliver unique value. And so don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't deny who you are. And so that was the best advice I got.
I asked Barbara McKenzie, CEO of Business Link, this question. I'm going to ask you this as well. If you had a movie made about your life, who would you want to play you in that movie?
Always been a big fan of Julia Roberts. She's a pretty sensational actress. So, wow, wouldn't that be amazing?
I could see the resemblance to some extent. We're going to do a this or that thing. So it's essentially, I'm going to ask you something and you just have to pick one. Ask permission or beg forgiveness?
Beg forgiveness.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Milk.
Window or aisle seat?
Window.
What's the fastest that you've ever driven your vehicle at?
Always within legal speeds.
If you could talk to President Trump, what would you want to talk about?
I think I would ask him why he doesn't listen to his communications advisor more. Sensibility at times.
Yeah, we'll move on. What compliment do people give you the most? Or what's the best compliment that you've received till lately? You think?
I'll tell you what, I don't know if it's a verbal compliment, but I love it when I make my kids laugh. And so if I can make someone laugh, I think that maybe being disarming might be one of the descriptors.
If you could have any three people dead or alive for dinner, who would they be and why?
I think that everyone can say that they have had family members that have passed too early. And so I've had two of my dads that have passed away. And so I would probably pick the two of them for sure. And my grandma was always someone that I went to for great advice. And so I would pick family members, and those would be my three.
Okay, that's great. And as we transition back to our questions, my last one is, if you could be from any other decade or era, which era would it be and why?
Well, I guess I would probably go to a fashion lens, and I do appreciate the look of the hoop skirt, although I would not say that I would appreciate being a woman during those times. But I think that they would have been an incredible time to have fought for women's rights, women's right to vote. And so I would say I would like to have been at a moment of time where women really moved forward in their leadership roles.
Okay, good. And I think that brings me to this part about, as we're winding down, we've got about 10 minutes left. We know that we're in a global crisis. We know that a lot of people are going through hardships, and people are always looking for advice as to what they need to do. A lot of businesses, like people or businesses, are trying to figure out how do we pivot or change our businesses. What advice would you give small and medium-sized businesses who are already in the market today to try and pivot, change, and establish themselves?
Customer, customer, customer. That is key. And so I talk a lot about that as well from my Intuit experience days, is making sure that you are providing the most incredible value. And so Net Promoter Score, all entrepreneurs should know this, is recommending your product to someone is one of the great measures. And customer observation. Customers will tell you one thing and do another. And it's not as though they are being intentionally deceitful, but it's behavior really that you need to observe. How are they using your product? And just really focus on customer value.
Okay, that's good advice. Most of us, we just take things at face value, so sometimes that's not.
Follow home is a great practice. Intuit, every employee was challenged to go follow a customer into their home, be invited into their home to watch them use the offering and really see the pain points that they were experiencing. And so that kind of customer intimacy is so critical for entrepreneurs.
And I predict, or I feel that there will be a lot of people trying to step into the world of entrepreneurship in the next little while, just because they there might not be enough jobs available, and people want to figure out how to move forward. So, considering that, in fact, is what do you think are advices that you would give startup businesses essentially to focus on as you move again?
Don't do it on your own. Startup Edmonton is the best entry point if you are exploring an idea or a problem or a company that you've always wanted to start. Startup Edmonton will help you really validate who your customer is and will provide you with mentors and those that have been there before, gone and done that. And so don't do it alone, and Startup Edmonton is a great place to start.
Okay, so I think I've run out of my questions for today, and I think we've had some really great conversation. Thank you very much, Cheryll, for your time, and I'd still like to get to know you a little bit more personally, considering that we have a little bit more time. But we'll focus a little bit on the work side of things. What do you do personally and spend most of your time on as you grow yourself professionally? I think that's one of the questions that I would personally want to know is, how do you keep yourself aware of things that are happening and making sure that you professionally grow yourself?
I've got two pieces of advice. So I spend a lot of my time talking to people, and I am constantly asking for feedback when I'm in these conversations. And so I think being open to constructive feedback is really important, and asking for it. I strongly believe that feedback is a gift. Those that have worked with me have heard me say that thousands of times. And so really being open and asking for it when you have the opportunity. I think that being open to challenges is important. So when I joined Intuit, I joined as the facilities project manager for this building that they were constructing. My journey then led over into being the PR manager for Canada. It led to being the global communications leader. I led community relations. I led our giving program. And so I think that it's looking for opportunities to do new things, to try new things, be brave. We really only have one opportunity at this life and one opportunity to learn things. And so constantly be challenging yourself or looking for challenges to do different things, try new things.
Oh, thank you very much for that. I think I've learned a lot in this last 1 hour, essentially talking to you, like going from your work that you've done through IBM, Intuit, EDC, Innovate Edmonton, just kind of sharing your journey with us. I really appreciate it. And I was taking notes as I was going through this because I was like, oh, this would be a nice little conversation that we could keep going on. I'd really like to talk to you offline as well on the Hub Center. It's something that I'm looking at myself in terms of creating more of a prototyping center around the social component of things. And so that I'd like to understand more about what you went through personally as you went through going through those elements. I know one of the questions that I will be asking you is, if it was not aligned with the city, would it have been more successful as compared to, so because, and I'm not pulling this as saying that there's a political push to it, but sometimes, you get that freedom being an independent organization doing it as compared to be something that's governed by an organization. So you're free to answer the question here if you want, but if not, we'll take it offline.
I think that there's a reason that these organizations like Edmonton Global and the Future Innovation Authority, they are arm's length organizations. They are meant to be agile. They are meant to operate like the private sector, to explore things, to take risks, to fail, to try again. And so I do think that it is important for these organizations to be independent of government.
Okay. So we're almost out of time here. I really thank you for your time and your meaningful messages and insights into your growth and development from where you started to where you are at now. I wish you all the success in your role with Startup Genome and wherever you decide to go forward from there. I'm going to keep in touch with you just because of our backgrounds and how we're going to be connected to Edmonton and growing Edmonton and being part of the whole innovation scene. So I look forward to connecting with you, and hopefully we can actually go out for coffee once after all these pandemics kind of like is better handled. I won't say it's done. It's just more of how we better handle it and make sure that it's safe for everybody to go out there. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And do you have any final comments for us?
Well, Alex, I really want to thank you for this time. I do appreciate, and I liked that you and I got a chance to talk even before this session so that I could understand what you're doing with Next Evolution Ventures. I'm really encouraged by your work. I was happy to have this opportunity to speak in this way, and I am always available for more conversations. I would love to help be part of your success, and so if there's anything that I can do personally to help you, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I am out and about, and so maybe I will pop into work nicer and see if you're around, and maybe we'll go for a walk and a walk coffee.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks,
And
Alex.
yeah, thank you
Bye-bye.
very much. Bye.